Divine Entertainment. By Orthoris. Chapter 42. Amber. Scholar Arc. Month 2, Day 1. Hades sat on a comfortable chair grown and shaped from vines. In front of him was a similarly grown table, upon which rested a tea set. He had poured himself a steaming cup of herbal tea and was reclined and relaxed, content to enjoy the view he had. Asphodel grew as far as the eye could see, creating a veritable sea of white before him, disturbed only by the odd tree growing out of it. The asphodel meadow always was a place of relaxation for Hades, a place he could retreat to whenever he needed a break from his duties. Sure, Elysium could be considered to be paradise by many, but the population tended to disturb his quiet time more often than not. As such, the asphodel meadow proved to be a much better place to relax. The only sound came from the wind disturbing the sea of flowers all around him, the soft rustling soothing his addled mind. Hades closed his eyes and listened to the symphony created by the interplay of wind and nature, letting his mind wander to times less stressful. He was pondering meaningless things, such as which tea he should drink the next time he came here, when he heard footsteps approaching from behind. As he was in no rush, he waited until whoever came to visit him stood almost directly behind him. Without opening his eyes, he spoke to the mysterious visitor. "What brings you to this desolate part of my dominion?" he asked. "I bring news about our trapped associate," the visitor replied. "Ah, young Alexander, how does he fare?" Hades queried, genuinely curious as it had been some time since he last checked in on him. "Well, he has taken to calling himself Atlas recently." "Oh? How curious! Why is this?" "His reasoning was that he wanted to leave his old life behind by shedding his old name, although, I believe there is more to his decision." "Do you think the souls have started to merge?" Hades took another sip of his tea, eyes still closed. "Most likely. Has Zeus caught on to this?" "I don't believe so," the visitor replied. "As a matter of fact, he's already lost interest for the most part. He really only checks in sporadically, but still keeps urging us to hurry up and finish the prison. Thankfully the others flock to him like sheep, meaning I'm the only one viewing most of the time." "Good, wouldn't want him to become suspicious," Hades sighed contently. "So how long until it's completed?" 2 weeks at most," came the swift reply. "Once we're done, he'll be trapped forever." "I hope you remembered to leave the back door open for me," Hades stated. "Of course." Hades nodded in satisfaction, once again sipping his tea, letting silence fall over them. After a few minutes of listening to the soft melody around them, Hades found one more question he needed to ask. "Have you provided Atlas with the means to his escape?" "The bait has been cast, but it's still up to him whether he bites or not. I had to make it as opaque as possible so that no one else would catch on," the visitor replied. "Good, good." Hades took the final sip from his tea, emptying the cup. He opened his eyes for the first time since the conversation started and turned around to face his guest. A second chair grew out of the ground next to him and he gestured towards it. "Tea. Asterisk." Atlas sat down at one of the desks in the front row of the classroom. He found himself reasonably excited for his first day of regular classes. He'd decided to show up a little earlier so he could snag himself a good spot. Back on Earth he always sat in the front row as well, albeit for very different reasons. In his experience, the teachers were usually fixated on the back rows when looking for troublemakers, allowing for him to goof off relatively unnoticed. While that was certainly an added bonus, here in Equus, he found himself wanting to sit in front for an entirely different set of reasons, mainly that magic had the side effect of transforming him into a huge nerd. The classroom he found himself in was relatively simple as far as classrooms went. Located at the front was the teacher's desk, as well as the blackboard, which took up almost all of the wall it hung upon. Filling up the rest of the room were the students' desks, neatly organized in 4 rows of 3 desks, each desk providing ample space for 2 ponies. Sitting front and center, Atlas took out all his study supplies from his saddlebags and neatly organized them on his half of the desk, until it was littered with empty scrolls, quills, and books. As he found himself with approximately half an hour of time to waste, he decided to read up on the first class according to his schedule. Magical theory. Even though that was the most boring subject of them all in his opinion, he still recognized its importance and diligently studied its dry rhetoric. It was about 20 minutes into his lecture that the first of his classmates started showing up. He gave each unicorn that entered a disarming and welcoming smile, hoping for some pony to take up the empty space next to him. The first few to enter just awkwardly smiled back, and took up their positions at the very back of the class, as was tradition. As the seats around him started to fill up, his mood started to sour proportionally. Apparently, his reputation preceded him to the point that even new students already knew about him, adopting the same weird strategy of avoiding him as did the rest of the school. Atlas once asked Amethyst if he had any idea why every student in the school seemed to give him the cold shoulder, but since he dealt with a similar situation they didn't make much headway. For now, the best guess they had was that, due to their potential importance in the future, every pony was waiting to see if it was worth sucking up to them or if it potentially could hurt their own reputation. Atlas still doubted that reasoning, since he was sure there would at least be one or two slick asshats trying to get into their good graces if that was the case. Personal goons, so to speak. By the time their teacher had entered and closed the door behind her, Atlas had adopted a deadpan frown. Literally every single seat was occupied, except the one next to him of course. In a sense, he almost found it comical, but since he wanted to make at least one or two new friends today, he was totally bummed by the turnout. With nothing better to do, he observed his new teacher as she wrote her name on the blackboard with a floating piece of chalk. She had a pristine white coat, the only thing disturbing its purity was her cutie mark. A blackboard adorned with some gibberish writing, most likely intended to represent teaching. At first, Atlas thought her mane was black, but upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a really deep shade of green. "Good morning class," she said as she turned to face them. "My name is Emerald F.O." Her introduction was disturbed by the classroom door flying open with an audible crash and a unicorn mare stumbling in, face planting with all the grace of a blue whale at a dance rehearsal. While most ponies just stared at her in confusion, with the occasional blink, snickering could be heard from the back of the class. As brains were rebooting, the mare with an orange coat and blonde mane rose from her make-out session with Atlas's oldest friend in this world. "The ground. Sorry. Sorry." The mare sputtered, hastily closing the door behind her with magic. "I hope I'm not too late." Their teacher blinked a few times, apparently finalizing her reboot and catching up to the situation before addressing their newest arrival. No, I was just about to begin class," she confirmed. "Although please make sure to be present a bit earlier next time." "Will do, it won't happen again." The orange mare briefly scanned the room for an empty seat until her eyes fell upon the seat next to Atlas. She cantered over to it and sat without hesitation, pulling out her materials as soon as she arrived. Meanwhile, the teacher returned to her introduction. "As I was saying, my name is Emerald Forest and I'll be your homeroom teacher for the next year. Pleased to meet you all." A cacophony of murmured agreements was her only response. Seemingly used to it, she continued on with the thing teachers loved and all students hated. "It's always exciting for me to meet new faces at the start of a year, so why don't you all introduce yourself?" she stated with annoying enthusiasm, which was answered by a multitude of groans. "Why don't we start with you, Miss?" Emerald Forest gestured towards the mare sitting closest to the door. She had a yellow coat and a pink mane with her unwillingness evident in her eyes. Nonetheless, she got up and did as she was told. "My name's Golden Eye, my special talent is identifying magical currents, my hobbies are..." The mare was rattling down her introduction when Atlas felt something poke his side. He refocused his attention to the mare sitting next to him, who apparently had something to say to him. "Hey, my name's Amber, what's yours?" she asked in a hushed voice. Atlas, was his simple response. He didn't expect the current development, already having made peace with the fact that he would be largely ignored during class as well. Cool, I'm looking forward to sitting next to you and hopefully getting to know you, she said, a smile adorning her face. Likewise, Atlas simply nodded towards her, a small smile spreading on his face as well. Apparently satisfied with his answer, Amber shifted her attention back towards the pony currently introducing himself, which was a deep green stallion with a light blue mane. Meanwhile, Atlas threw a little celebration inside his head. It wasn't clear if Amber simply hadn't heard of him or just didn't care, but whatever the case may be, he had just made a new friend. Spending an entire year without someone to talk to would have been incredibly boring, so he was glad that the solution presented itself in the form of his desk partner. Asterisk. The magical bell rang, signaling an end to morning classes. Atlas, as well as the rest of the class, started to put away their things. While morning classes were mostly dedicated to all things theoretical, afternoon classes was where they practiced actual spell casting. They would split into groups depending on their affinities, where they would hone their abilities. Hey, Atlas. Amber asked from the side. Yeah. Wanna go grab some lunch together? Atlas had talked a bit with Amber during classes and the smaller breaks. As it turns out, she really hadn't heard anything about him, the reason being that she came from a relatively poor family, but managed to get into the academy due to her talent in the School of Energy. Sure, wanna go back to the dorms or just grab something from a vendor outside? Atlas asked as he put away the last of his things. Let's go back to the dorms, they make a lasagna to die for, Amber replied with a slight drool. Alright, sounds good to me, Atlas chuckled and started towards the door, Amber not far behind him. As they walked through the halls, Atlas's eyes fell once again upon Amber's flank. Her cutie mark consisted of 2 question marks and 1 exclamation mark, an unusual motive if he ever saw one. Ever since he first saw it, he tried to make sense of it, but try as he might he just couldn't. Hey, Amber. Atlas started. What does your cutie mark mean? I can't figure out what your special talent is. Is there a specific reason you didn't mention it when you introduced yourself to the class? Amber winced at the question and Atlas immediately regretted asking it. Had he just overstepped his boundaries? What if there was some tragic backstory to it she didn't want to talk about? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. He hastily added, trying to defuse the situation. No, it's okay, Amber sighed. I know it's a rather unusual mark, and to be honest, I have no idea what my special talent is either. Atlas raised an eyebrow to that statement but let her continue on undisturbed. I got it after a magical surge a few years back, Amber explained. It just kinda appeared and no one was really able to figure it out, even now I still haven't been able to. Wow, Atlas said surprised. I didn't know something like that was possible. Well, I didn't know it was possible for some pony to have 3 affinities at the same time, so I believe we're even in that regard, Amber replied playfully. If you say so, Atlas replied, happy to have at least made one new friend today. To me, it's way more interesting that you managed to get this old without finding your special talent, Amber said and pointed at Atlas's decidedly empty flank. You ever get made fun of for that? A few odd looks and cold shoulders every now and then, but no pony has tried to ridicule me for it, why? Atlas replied while rolling his eyes. Just curious, Amber replied. You are quite the enigma, you know that. Yeah, Atlas laughed. You're not the first one to tell me that. Author's note. And the crew is finally complete. Welcome Amber. Also, we finally hear some news from the world beyond, it has been a while since we last seen any of them, hasn't it? Atlas's prison is almost finished and he'll be trapped for good. Or will he? As I already stated, I won't bore you anymore with boring classes about magic. Everything that needed to be said has been said and classes will mostly be skipped from here on out. Those who follow my blog will have seen that I recently made a blog about the future of this story, concerning time skips mostly. I've decided to stick to my old format of doing time skips that span relatively large amounts of time, so get ready for them, as they will start soon. That being said, instead of adding a completely new arc of adventure fun times for our group of friends, I've added a sort of mini arc, that will span like 2 or 3 chapters at most. Look forward to it. Once again, thanks to my editor Azriel and my proofreader Kilobytes for a job well done. Today's chapter was brought to you by this song. Lately I've kind of been into FNAF fan songs. Even though I think the games are pretty stupid, the fandom cranks out some good stuff. Happy face. End author's note.